Hey everyone, welcome back to the second part of my top 100 games of all time. So, here we go. If you're watching, let me know how the audio sounds. But last week we did 100 through 91, and this week we are on to 90 through 81. This section has a whole bunch of games that dropped a little bit in the rankings. I feel kind of because I've played a number of new games, or one of them I played it a number of times, and just felt like I'd played it enough, I think, or need to experience the expansions a little bit more. But we are continuing with our old fashions. This is just very simple, straightforward, orange bitter, old fashioned. Very good. Yep, very good. Toki whiskey, so a Japanese whiskey, which is somewhat has that really light color to it. But I'm not going to do much lead in. Let's get onto the list with number 90. So my number 90 was 51 last year, and it's one of a few two-player only games that I have on the list. This one I actually picked up on Kickstarter because it was from a Kickstarter company on Kickstarter that I really enjoy, Pencil First Games, which might help you figure out what game this is. But my number 90 is Skulk Hollow. So this is a really kind of cute game. The artwork in it is phenomenal. Very cutesy woodland creatures, or foxes. And it's an asymmetrical game where both players will have different objectives that they're trying to do. The person who's playing the foxes, they're trying to stop the big guardian that's come to their lands, or has awoken, is basically the story they go within the game. And these guardians, they have different objectives and play differently. I think there are 4, maybe 5 in the base box, as well as then I think there was a second Kickstarter for some stuff. But it's all really simple card play, which is a lot of fun. And what the foxes do, they're playing down cards to be able to get onto the creature, which actually takes them off of the main board onto a creature board, and then they fight and knock out different abilities that creature has. That creature generally is trying to knock out the leader of the foxes or some other objective. So like the basic one, the guy whose shadow you can see on the box, or silhouette you can see on the box, he wants to just kill a certain number of the foxes. If he reaches that number, he wins. But he also can win by taking out the fox. So it's a really fun game. One I haven't played as much as I'd want to, mainly because it's a 2-player only. And while I do play fairly often 2-player, I don't necessarily go out of my way to just pick 2-player only games. This one is a really good one if you can track it down. It's a lot of fun and a lot of interesting little interactions with the game in what you can do. Very simple to play, but a lot of fun. So my 89 dropped from 53, so not quite the drop that Skulk Hollow had, but this is one of the earlier racing games that I got because it's just a silly, fun racing game that has you either doing laps over a single board or going down a whole stretch of 3 boards, and that's Titan Race. Titan Race is a goofy, good time. It's also a drafting game, like a die drafting game, which is a lot of fun. So, for example, in a 4-player game, you would roll 5 dice, or 4 dice, excuse me, 4 dice. First player would take one of those dice, and that's going to determine how they move on the board. Then the next player takes, the next player takes, and then when it's down to 1 die, you pick them all up, roll again, and start the process. And you can race over one board 3 times, and whoever wins or finishes after that third one wins the race. Or you can do it over 3 different boards, but each different board has its own special thing to it. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a game that plays pretty fast and is pretty goofy with how it plays and the theme. You have these riders on the back of monsters. You get these special power cards. There's one of the maps where it's ice on one side or spots of ice. So if you go across that, you slide the whole way. And just a good time. Just a good, simple, filler style of game. Next up, we have a classic. This one only dropped 11 spots from 77 to 88. And this is one of the earliest games that I ever saw use like a Yahtzee style mechanic. Besides Yahtzee. And you can probably guess what it is just from that. It's King of Tokyo. This is a game about monsters going into Tokyo, smashing other monsters, and trying to be the last one standing. A lot of fun, and just enjoyable. It's a good one to pull out with new gamers. There's enough going on. Like, okay, you go into Tokyo, you can punch everybody, but you can't heal, so it gives people a little bit to think about, which honestly is just a fun time. It's a game I don't necessarily pull off the shelf super often, but whenever I do, it's probably one we're going to play twice, because games go pretty fast, and well, sure, you can with points. Most of the time, everybody's just trying to punch each other and see who comes out on top. Then, keeping on the theme of Tokyo, we have a dexterity-based game. This is coming in at number 87. Last year it was 31. And some of it being that high last year was a pretty new game in my collection. This one is one of the most aesthetically pleasing games that I own, especially when it's all set up. And this is Tokyo Highway from Iten. It's a very simple game. All you're doing is building out roads, bouncing them on pylons, around buildings, trying to go over and under other people's roads so you can place out cars. The first person to place out all their cars wins. But as stuff goes in amongst each other, that means that now it's a little bit tricky potentially to put in some of those pieces, and you only have so many pylons, little discs that you can set out. To add to that, you can only go up or down one single pylon at a time. That means that sometimes your plans might not work out. You have a couple opportunities, 2 opportunities to cheat with that, where you can put down and adjust by 2, but you have to use one of your yellow discs. And if you use a yellow disc, that means you've used it. You can't use it again later. So you have limited opportunity. You really have to decide when you want to do that. And eventually you just get roads completely mixed together. If you knock stuff over, whoever's stuff you knocked over, you have to put it back, and then for each piece, you're giving them some of your pylons, which makes it even harder for you to finish because now you don't have the ability to go, say, 4 high because that uses 4 of those little discs. It's a fun one. Always a good time. Always looks amazing when it's done. And that is my number 87, Tokyo Highway. And you can see that I'm kind of clipping along a little bit faster this time than last time. Last time I had fun talking a lot about it, a lot about the games, and I think we'll see some of the lists a little bit further down, take a little bit longer. But we're hopping into an IP that I enjoy the books. So it's a book series. Which one is it? I don't necessarily enjoy the author. Now, that doesn't necessarily limit it too much. There are a number of authors that I can enjoy their books, but I don't enjoy the author themselves. But this is probably the first one you thought of. And that is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. This is a deck building game, and it's a good, simple one. And it's a good one that progresses over time. It's a game where you play through the first book in your first game. Then you play through the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And it adds in new cards, new powers, new abilities, things like that the whole time as you go. It's almost Legacy-like in that you're unlocking stuff and the game builds and changes over time, but you don't destroy anything, so you can reset it. Now, this is a game I haven't actually gotten all the way to the end. I know there's one complaint about the game. The further you go in, the more time it takes because you never lose the villains that you're trying to defeat from the previous chapters. So you just have more and more and more you have to deal with. And sometimes Crab and Goyle will come out immediately after Voldemort. It's like, well, that's a bit of anticlimactic thing that happened there, but the fact that you also get to do more, you have more things that you're dealing with, it works well. And I'm okay not having played all the way through this because, well, one, it's going to happen eventually, but also this is a really good introductory deck building game. Like, this is a game, because of the theme, you can pull out with a lot of people. They're going to be familiar with Harry Potter. I mean, basically everybody is. So it's a good one to pull out, get to the table, play through the first chapter. Everybody gets to play as one of the main 4 characters-ish. It's, well, main 3 characters plus Neville. And yeah, it's always a fun time. I do want to get through all of it at some point in time here, but it's just not one that I've gotten through everything yet, and it's one that every time I pull it out, I enjoy it. I mean, looking at this list, Skull Hollow and now here at 86, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, both of those games are games I really want to get back to the table again pretty soon here. King of Tokyo and Titan Race, I've played both of those more, and I actually played Tokyo Highway this year, so I mean, it's kind of weird to say that a game in my top 100, well, yeah, I played it this year. That's recent, but I play a lot of campaign games. You saw me play Aeon's End Legacy here on stream. I play a lot of roll and rights or small games like that. So I guess I'm not too surprised, but it's, well, why would I be surprised at what I do? But it's probably not too surprising. But it'd be nice to get some more of these games back to the table. It's always just, okay, am I going to get these back to the table over the ones higher on the list. That isn't to say I don't really like these games. I really do. But when I mean, at this point, at the end of this list, I'll have 80 games. 80 that I like better. Most people don't play 80 games in a year. So, I do, but I'm also playing new games. I'm backing stuff on Kickstarter and buying stuff from my local game stores or miniature market and stuff like that and bringing those in and trying to get those to the table as well. All right, so let's hit 85. Last year it was 46. And I believe the year before that it was about down at this location. This is a semi-cooperative game, and that might be enough clue for some people to get it right away. This is kind of one of the originals that brought that in. Not the original necessarily, but it's a semi-cooperative game with a hidden traitor and a zombie survival theme, which I'm talking about Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game. And this is another one I haven't played in a little bit, but I have played this a number of times. I feel like I play it about once every year and a half. Just because it's a bigger game to pull out, not only because it takes a while as you're playing through this scenario trying to find a cure or make sure you have enough food to be able to move or get fuel or fight off the zombies, whatever your objective is, you have something you're working towards. And even the short ones, I believe they have short, medium, and long in length. They're not much different in length, really, in my experience. But this is a good zombie game. This is the type of zombie game that I've enjoyed a lot thus far because it's about the survivor surviving. I mean, that's very much what The Walking Dead is about, a comic book series that I thought was fine. But this brings it to the table, and I think just the little bit more randomness of what goes on. Every time you play, you kind of feel like there's a story. You send somebody out, and they're the person who's doing stuff over and over and over again. Or somebody comes back to to your headquarters, to your main base of operations, who's been bitten, and now are they going to infect anybody else? You have all these questions that are then enhanced by the Crossroads cards, which are basically little bits of story, little bits of tough decision that you need to make. Now, I will say, with this game, I do play with one house rule. And that's that instead of drawing one Crossroad card on a turn, you draw two. Because Crossroads cards only trigger if something happens. Just drawing one per game means that fairly often nothing's going to happen. Drawing two, I would still say the majority of the time, or close to 50-50, nothing happens. But there are some times where you get to make a tough decision. And now, you never use both of the cards. Generally, it's hard to trigger both of them at once. It is possible, in which case the person who's reading decides. But you just having to make those decisions more often is really interesting. Do you try and bring in more survivors, or do you get more food? You have a lot of really good choices in the game, and it's one that can be big and can be long, and that I probably have other games that I want to get to the table before it, but if I want a big game night of just sitting down and playing one game, Dead of Winter is always a good choice. We go from a very big game to what was my 48 last year and is my 84 this year. And this is one of them that I have played a lot. This is a bluffing, hidden information game from Bezier Games. So, if you're familiar with them, they're mainly known for One Night Ultimate Werewolf. And this one uses the theme, kind of, but is silver. I mean, you can see the werewolves tattooed on his arm. And silver, obviously, werewolves don't like silver. But this is a really fun little game. This game, there was a game with cards I would play once in a while growing up. Just a deck of cards, and some of my cousins knew it. But it's basically, you have, in this case, 5 cards in front of you, all face down. You look at 2 of them, and you know what they are. And you're trying to get the lowest possible number total in front of you. It goes from 0 to 13 in the base game. There are 3 expansions or standalone expansions to it. Silver. So this is Silver Amulet. There's Silver Bullet, Silver Coin, and Silver Dagger. And all of them play the same. There's a special ability that goes with the amulet, bullet, dagger, or coin. You would only ever use one of them in a game, but you can mix and match characters from any of them because it's just cards numbered 0 through 13 with different numbers of each of those cards in the deck. Like zeros, there are only ever 2 of them. So tons of variety. And let me get back to my little bit confusing description of the game. So you have your 5 cards face down in front of you. You know 2 of them. You're trying to swap out your cards to figure out, one, what you have, because you can put like a 5 down in front of you, face down, replacing a card that you don't know what it is. That could be a 12. That could be a 2. And then your opponent can potentially draw stuff. Like if you accidentally discard 2, they can pull that out and it goes face up into their village. And then you might get a card that allows you to swap 2 cards. And so you play that down, you give them your 5, you take back the 2. And the 2, when it's face up, has a special power. And that allows you to look at other cards that you have that are face down. So you look at one of those. Okay, now you have 2 6s that you know of. Well, you can trade both of those 6s in for, say you trade them in for a 7. You're reducing not only the number of cards you have, but also your total number of points. It's a good concept. It's a fun game. And yes, there's a lot of take that. There's a fair amount of meanness to this game, or really weird interactions that you can have happen depending on the cards and the powers of each number, but a fun one to play with and a fun one to just, you can sit down and knock out a game, which is 4 rounds, pretty fast, because once you get your village down to 4 or 3, 2, or even 1, I've done that before, you can call for a vote at any point in time, and if you're right and you have the least number of points in your village, you get 0 points. Your opponent gets whatever points they scored. If you're wrong, your opponent gets whatever points they scored. You get whatever points you scored plus 10. So it's this, when do you try and call for that vote? Because you have to, not only do you have to be low in terms of numbers, you have to be down from 5 cards. So, really fun game, really small box. I hope, and I haven't tried this yet, but I think that potentially all 4 boxes can fit into one of the boxes, and one of the boxes is only about this big. But it's just cards plus a few metal pieces for the amulet, bullet, coin, and dagger. So I think it I think I should do that actually soon here. I need more room for small games on my shelf. All right, that takes us to 83. 83 was not on the list when I did this in 2020. At least, I don't believe it was. Now I'm second guessing myself. I have my list right here. Pretty sure I got it after I made the list last time. Yeah, I don't see it. Pretty sure it would be my top 100 had I had it last year. So I'm going to say I did not. And this one is a party game. It's a party game about colors. And it is only about colors. I'm trying to get people to guess the color that you have. So it's hues and cues. This is a really fun, different party game because everybody is trying to guess the color that you have. You have a card that has 3 colors on it. You pick one of them. You give a one-word clue. Everybody places a marker where they think matches up to that. And then a 2-word clue. And Nosferatu Clown, Connect 4 would clearly be number 4. In fact, my whole top 10 actually just matches the number. It just got really hard when I was down in the 80s to find games that had that in it. So with this, it can get tricky because what some people think, like I could say sky blue or I could say sky. Well, you're probably thinking blue, but what shade of blue would sky be? I might then say Royals baseball for my second one. This is, I think, one that I actually did, but nobody actually knew Royals baseball uniform colors, so that didn't help me any. But it's really tricky and interesting to come up with the clues, and I always say, too, when you're doing this, when you're giving your clues, look at the color on the card and give the clue off of that, because on the board, especially for that first clue, it looks very different. Like the fact it's surrounded by other colors instead of black makes it seem really different and creates an interesting challenge. And I mean, it's a very interesting challenge just to come up with a 1-word clue to get somebody to guess a color. Yeah, this one I've played fairly recently, but now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, I'd be up for playing this one again. Maybe I'll have to come up with some board game night thing. Get it back to the table. Next up, we have another deck building game. And this one I own. You can barely see it in the corner of the picture behind Hues and Cues. But oh yeah, that is fair, Nosferatu Clown. This game is Hues and Cues is slightly less than ideal for colorblind people. Unfortunately, there is no way around it. One of the people who played it with us, he, like myself, does software or computer programming, and he actually had an app on his phone for color blindness, basically to it allowed the camera from the phone to filter it into what different types of colorblind people would be able to see. And looking at the board, you got some real interesting things out there. So definitely not a colorblind friendly game at all, unfortunately, but still a good one. So back to my 82 was 67 last year. We have a deck building game that is just peeking out from behind using cues, which doesn't help that much because there are actually 3 of them peeking out back there. This one is the original Clank deck building adventure. And I will say I have only played this one online during COVID. There was a decent tabletop simulator implementation of this game, and it's a lot of fun. I've played Clank in space. If you've seen previous lists, you may have an idea whether or not it will make my top 100, but I really like this game. It's a good push your luck deck building game where you're delving into a dungeon, trying to get treasure and get back out. And yeah, Nosferatu Clown, all of them are great that I've played. So I'm going to point to the one at the bottom here. This one you can barely see is Clank Legacy. And I just haven't gotten that one to the table yet, but I really want to because it's a deck building game, it's a Clank game, and it's a legacy game. But the idea of diving in, trying to get the most points, get the treasure that is worth the most, but the further you go in, the more potentially you're making noise. You're clanking around in your chainmail or plate mail armor, and you're alerting the dragon who's protecting his horde, and you're putting in cubes into a bag, and some of them are just going to be originally in the bag for the dragon. They don't do anything. But as you put more and more cubes in and the dragon starts to draw them out, now anytime it draws out one of your color, now you're going to start taking damage. And that damage, when you eventually have cubes that fill up the whole line, you're knocked out. So you could just go in a little bit, grab a treasure, and try and get out as fast as possible. But if somebody else can make it a little bit more efficiently and go a little bit deeper in, prefer to clink instead of clank. That is very nice, Rebecca. You can still sneak back out in time, and yeah, it's just a really good game that works really well. There are lots of expansions for Clank. I do not have any of them yet because, well, I haven't played my physical copy, but I'm very concerned that the second I do, I'm going to start to pick them up just to add in a little bit more variety and some more random goofiness. And then that is going to take us to number 81. This was number, I believe, 59. I can't read my own handwriting. Last year. And this one has been on the list for a little bit. I blame Rodney Smith from Watch It Played for introducing me to this game because he did a playthrough with this game. This is a space-themed game where you're trying to escape a black hole. And that game actually just came out with a second edition, so if you went to Pop-Up Gen Con, you definitely saw this around. It's going to be Gravwell. So, Gravwell is a fun one because, again, it's a fairly chaotic game. And one that I haven't played recently enough, come to think about it. But you the idea is you have jumped into another dimension and or through a wormhole, and there's a black hole that is sucking you down that you are trying to escape from, but you're out of fuel. And somewhere up here, there's the spot that you can escape from. Fortunately, you have a whole bunch of like other random gases on your ship. It's a little bit confusing story wise, but the game basically comes down to you're playing out cards that are elements, and you're putting those elements into your engine, and they'll do different things. But what order you activate them in matters because of how they work. So every round the elements will activate in alphabetical order. But how they work is some of them will cause you to move X number away, so 5 away, let's say, from the nearest ship. It pushes you away. That's great. Unless the nearest ship is ahead of you, now you pushed yourself backwards. Some will pull you towards the nearest ship. That's great. If you have a ship like 2 in front of you, you can play something that launches you forward 7. Now you've rocketed ahead. But if the nearest one is 2 behind you, now you just drop backwards 5. Or there are some that just pull ships closer to you. This can be useful for setting stuff up for the future, or you can end up with a situation where generally there are 2 derelict ships as well on the board to kind of help keep things moving so you're not so stuck in the back. But it's possible that you could be the middle ship and have 2 ships on either side of you. You activate. What's the closest ship to you? Well, you have one right on either side of you. Okay, well, if one side has more ships than the other, that'll be the direction you head. But you have then 2 ships on both sides. Your whole turn, you're just sitting there. You don't get to do anything on it. But if somebody has rocketed away from you, or away from that group, now that's going to start to influence and change things up. So if you're stuck in the middle like that, you want to play a card fairly late in the order and hope you go the right direction. Really fun one. Plays fast. A little bit confusing, I've found, for a lot of people playing it, simply because it's a little bit weird with how the gases work. People get the concept of like, okay, it pulls you towards the one that you're closer towards, or pushes you away from the one that you're closest to. But people also tend not to think about what they've already passed. We're familiar with board games where you only go forward around the board. It's how far forward do you go. So, it can be a bit confusing for some people. Yeah, Nosferatu, that is very right. It is a very abstract concept, but it's a cool mechanic, which the one part that I kind of skipped about mechanics wise is that, say in a 3-player game, at the start of a round, or start of a set of rounds actually, I would deal out 6 stacks of cards, I believe, or maybe it's 9, where the bottom ones are face down, the top ones are face up. So you draft basically your elements, and you know the top one that you're getting to use, but you don't know what that bottom one is. So it adds a little bit of interesting strategy as to what sort of elements you're going to be trying to take depending on where you are on the board. But that is going to be my numbers 90 through 81. So to go back through them again, We have Skulk Hollow, a two-player asymmetric game. Very simple to play, but a lot of fun and a lot of variability. We have Titan's Race, a goofy racing game trying to see how far you can knock your enemies over and get ahead of them. Can you lay down traps that catch them? All sorts of fun stuff like that. 88 is a classic at this point, King of Tokyo. This is a monsters beating up monsters game. Unless, of course, you're trying for points, but it's really a monsters beating up monsters game. After that, we have a dexterity game, stacking game, Tokyo Highway. It's one that I'm not necessarily great at, but a lot of fun, and it always looks so good on the table. At 86, we have Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, a really good introductory deck builder that has a theme everybody can understand and get behind in terms of the story that it's telling. And then at 85, we have kind of another classic as well, Dead of Winter, this hidden traitor, potentially semi-cooperative game. Very good time. A little bit long, but always fun when I do get it to the table. Then we have Silver, a kind of abstract game, take that type game. Fun one, nice filler, trying to score the fewest points possible sort of game. It takes a while to describe, but when you get to the game, it's fun and simple enough. Then we have our not so colorblind friendly game in Hues and Cues. It's a good party game though, and it's something that feels very different from basically any other sort of party game that I've played, mainly because of the fact it's colors versus words. And it feels like it has more replayability because of that. Then at 82, we go back to Clank, a deck building adventure game. Good deck building game. A lot of fun. A lot of goofiness. Great mechanics. And try not to make too many clanking noises. And then finally at 81, we have Gravwell. Technically, Gravwell escaped from the ninth dimension. The new version is just called Gravwell 2nd Edition. Probably easier to find that one. Actually, it's going to be really easy right now since it just came out. It is a fun, pretty abstract game, but really good mechanics and good twists on how you move, how you're always moving away from something or towards something, and how you have to balance that out. Yeah, Rebecca, Hues and Cues is a lot of fun. It's one that, one of the people who I played it with recently, she said that her husband, he would not appreciate a game like that because he doesn't think kind of in colors that way. But the cool thing about it is, as the person giving the clues, you're trying to get people to guess your location or your spot. Let me actually go back to this because I was mainly talking about the colors, not about how it scores. But you're trying to get people to guess that color, that coordinate that will be there of whatever color it might be. But if you get close, and get one of the spots surrounding it, you still get 2 points. If you're one away from that the whole way around it, you get 1 point. But as the person giving the clues, only the people who end up in the 9x9 square, they give you points. So it's possible for the clue giver to get 9 points. And it's possible, I think the highest possible score for somebody who's just guessing would be to get 5 points. So it's nice because you're trying to all get to the same goal, but some people are better at guessing than others, and I'm not necessarily one of the best at guessing when it comes to it. And Nosferatu Clown, we know that your soul is black with orange polka dots. So, it's not that dark. But, there we have it. Come back next Wednesday. I know I have the stream, upcoming stream, ready for this, or for next Wednesday, as I go through 80 to 71. Connect 4 will not be on that section of my list. But if you want to know when I go live, click that notification bell, subscribe, click the notification bell on that video. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. There are some links where you can find other stuff I do down below, including nerdologist.com, which is a really nerdy board game website that I run. So, thank you all, everybody, so much for joining me. And I'm glad to introduce you to some new games, Rebecca. I probably have some, well, I won't say that any of them are too odd in the next list, but might be some you haven't heard of as well. Then, who knows? But thank you all for watching, and bottoms up.